Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Fix, Season 11, Episode 10. And this is the final episode of the season. I am Angel Borrelli, and with me is my wonderful co host and awesome catcher, Jacob Courtney. Hi, Jacob.
Hi, Angel. Happy to be here. Last podcast of the season. Glad we made it through the whole season successfully and ready for the next one.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be great. And listen, everyone, today's show is really, really special. So be sure and share this with as many pitchers and coaches as you can. Because as you know, pitching, bullpens, game day, those are sacred days in the life of a pitcher. And there's so many mistakes and things that I see that go on that if you can work on this in the off season, it can make such a difference for when you are in season. So today's going to be full of some of the things that Jacob and I have seen and a bunch of tidbits, actually providing all the pitchers and pitching coaches kind of with a little handbook of things that you can go on the field today and look for, watch for, think about, and just food for thought so that you can improve your performance. So today's episode is really, really important, and hopefully it's my gift to you as the closing of another wonderful season, which I have all of you listeners to thank for, and you as well, Jacob. But before we get started, Jacob and I wanted to talk about some unfinished business that we have, and that is with regard to the social media project that we kind of promised you at the beginning of the season. We kind of started it. If you went to Instagram and followed, you saw that we were getting started with posting, etc. And boy, we ran into some things that weren't expected, mostly with the volume of work it takes to produce good stuff, and then just some other issues which we want to address maybe in the off season and maybe come back to you with some stuff during the off season. We're not really sure. We have some things to work out, but Jacob, I'm going to let you take it from here. But, I'm someone, as I told you this morning, Jacob, I always do what I say I'm going to do. And I didn't quite do what I needed to do. And I just wanted you listeners to know you can still count on me to always be thorough. And I needed to address the fact that I made a promise and I didn't complete it. So, Jacob, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think we were really excited about it, and we still are. We want to get it back going. We need just a little more time for planning and everything to just be a little more organized for me and Angel to get more information out to you guys, because we would really love to provide you guys with all the information and posts we can to make this not only informational but fun for you guys to watch these videos every week when we post them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think all of you know by now, by listening to me, that I have a passion for teaching. I know I was put on this earth to do this job. I take this job seriously. My intent is to save the careers of pitchers and to have pitchers' dreams come true and to be that voice that's on the other side of so much that goes on in baseball. Everything that happens is for a reason. And every gimmick or everything that comes up that you see pitchers doing, it's not right or wrong. It's like food. It's like whatever works for you, works for you. But there has to be a voice on the other side where we're dealing with just the body, just with some of the basic stuff. And like I always have said, I equate myself to your fourth grade English teacher who at that time you're learning how to diagram sentences, you're learning about grammar, so that if later in life you want to become a rapper, at least it's based in good English, and then you get poetic license to make it sound as crazy as you want. That is sort of what I do, and I'm passionate about it, and I was loving the idea of being able to get to you more frequently. But between seeing pictures and doing the podcast, my plate got full and it was more of a commitment to do it the way I wanted. So anyway, there it is. Didn't want you to think I've lost my senses and promised and didn't notice that I didn't deliver. So, but I am a closer, so I'm going back in for the W again. So Jacob and I will work it out, and I couldn't have a better partner. So Jacob, thank you for that and for sticking with me through this.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. So, anyway, we're going to get started. So, listen, Jacob had a little assignment from me. We both
Hmm.
decided that we were going to watch the World Series. We were going to be paying attention to all of his games that he caught and things he was doing and things I was doing. And we were going to make a list of some of the biggest mistakes we see, some cool things that we see, and just things that we thought were important for us to mention as we part with you for a few months so that you have things to think about in this upcoming off-season months. So he created a list. I had a list, and lo and behold, he called me yesterday with his list. And I'm happy to say that our list coordinated so well. And he had a lot of extra stuff because, of course, he's on the other side of the ball. So he sees some really cool things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And in order to kind of organize this, let's start with some of the stuff we see and some of the stuff that I want you to think about when your pitchers arrive at the field, and pitchers, when you arrive at the field, when you walk through that gate and you put your stuff down and you're ready to go, when you grab your bands, which I hope you're doing a warm up, and you go to the fence, I want you to think about some things. So, the first thing, Jacob, that makes me crazy is when I see pitchers working, and and everyone, I have my own band warm up program, which is awesome. But it doesn't matter if you're using my program or another program that you love, as long as you do it. But what drives me crazy is when I see pitchers, even with my program, coming in with the wrong resistance band, or that the program they use requires them to use definitely different size bands, but heavy bands. The band that is used for a warm up by all my pitchers, and this is whether they are 10 years old or 28 years old. It is a 5 pound or less resistance, because the purpose of these warm up programs where you see pitchers hang up their band on the fence and do some movements, the purpose of that, and we're talking especially on game day or pen day, or for a pitcher every day he's playing catch. When you are warming up your arm and preparing your arm, especially if you're going to pitch, your first thing you're doing, the intent of it is to increase the heat in the joint so the lubrication gets heated. Second, to warm up the muscles so that blood gets flowing into the muscles, and hopefully to create and do movements that are similar to the angles you're going to be doing to help your body sort of get in gear. You're inputting data into a computer. It's also a moment for you to diagnose yourself the condition of your body. For example, my triceps are still sore from my chest workout yesterday. Wow, good thing I'm not pitching today. Geez, I've got to remember never to do chest the day before I pitch. Oh boy, my elbow, it was hurting on my last bullpen. Wow, it hasn't recovered. I need to go to a doctor. Or wow, I feel awesome today. Your warm up should be preparation in nature, not a workout. It should be diagnostic to you in the sense of what kind of condition are you in. And it should give you that moment to understand all the angles and all the things you're going to be doing in pitching, so that you feel like when you throw your first ball, you are not going to feel that original ping that you feel when you release it. Your first ball, the body should produce it with no pain at all. Jacob, what about you on this warm up stuff?
Yeah, so we talked about this yesterday, and I believe, I mean, coming from many programs that I've been in, I've seen many different warm ups, different bands, everything, and I just see pitchers using super heavy bands, and then they're almost out of breath or tired right after their workout. Not so much out of breath like they just ran, but almost like they just did a whole workout, like you said. And I just feel like I don't know how that's beneficial, and I feel like the pitchers should know why they're doing their warm up in a good way, not so much so they can get tired before they throw.
Exactly. And let's talk about especially the pen day and the game day warm up, because these are important days. And every day, these days that you're pitching days are sacred days. And normally guys have the same preparation on game days and pen days as they do on non-throwing days. And the thing is that you can't be doing things that you might like to do before you pitch or throw. So, for example, with what Jacob just said, if the band is too heavy, first of all, you're fighting it because bands are not cables in a gym. They're weird when they're heavy because they don't have what we call an eccentric moment. So there's no real flow. You're getting more of a pull on the concentric part, the part where you're pulling the force towards you. And so, number one, you're fighting the implement. Number two, you're fatiguing the muscle. There's no way around it. If you in your head are going, whoa, this is hard, then it's not preparation, it's work. The other thing is that a lot of times pitchers actually have other things that they do when they're getting warmed up. So I'll see them use heavy bands. Then I'll see them, a lot of people use weighted balls and do all kinds of crazy things against the wall. Now, if you're someone who wants to do that, fine. But before you do that, the bands you use should prepare your arm, not fatigue your arm, because that is an explosive movement. And you never use a muscular movement before an explosive movement because it's a different fiber, a different voltage of electricity, and you need to be hot, not tired, for that to pop. So let's say you're somebody who's going through a workout that includes weighted balls. And as you know, if you are someone who uses long toss, and I mean going out far to your max distance, or you use weighted balls, what the response of the muscle is in terms of science is such that that is not something you can use to prepare on pitching day. It is something that requires recovery because you are pushing the muscle beyond and fatiguing it for what your job is, which is to pitch. So if you have a preparation program that you use, and let's say you're doing the same thing on pitching days, and it involves weighted balls or it involves long distance throwing, those things require recovery. You want to rethink that and you want to rethink the weight of the bands. The other thing that's popular, and Jacob, you mentioned you saw something in the gym. I had a pitcher ask me about this the other day. So when you see people who pick up a blade and they're holding a blade and they've got it out in their arm up at shoulder height, and they're kind of like, it looks like they're shaking the blade. Those are called perturbations. What they are is they were used in rehab. They frequently are. And what it does is you've got a tiny, tiny movement. And what it's doing is challenging. Let's talk about a perturbation for the shoulder. They're holding the blade out in front, or they've got a ball in their hand and it looks like they're shaking it. Their arms at shoulder height. They're making very minuscule momentary movements. So to challenge, and I'm going to say this in sort of an English way, to challenge the joint to be able to accommodate in small moments the ability to stabilize that joint. That's a great thing in therapy. And actually, if you find it's useful in other times when you are warming up and you want to do perturbations, Jacob, I think you mentioned a guy with a ball next to his ear. He had his arm like, and what was he doing?
His arms were just up at 90, like a 90-90 next to his head, and he was just shaking them side to side.
Okay, and were his elbows pointing to the side, and the balls were by his ears, and his forearm was angled inward, and he was at shoulder height doing that.
His shoulders were at shoulder height, and then his forearms were at 90 compared to his shoulders. So it was straight up. His hands were straight up to the sky.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So those are perturbations as well. So those are fine for whenever you want to do something that is challenging to your structure. You do not challenge your structure on the day of your game. I want you to start thinking of game day and bullpen day as ready or not, here I come, meaning you have every other day of the week to do all the things that you think help you. But on the day that you are pitching, it is ready or not, here I come, and let's have it not be the not part. You need to be ready for that day where all your preparation has got you. You go in, you loosen up, you do your warm up with the bands, and then you get ready and do your throwing with intent, which we'll talk about in a minute. You get on the bullpen. You either have an amazing bullpen or you have a pen in a game, and that's how you do pen and game day. You do not do things that challenge, try to strengthen, or fatigue the muscles on days that you are pitching, and also when you are in full recovery from an outing, because you again are bringing in work to tissues that need rest. So, if, for example, Jacob, you saw a pitcher doing what you were talking about in the dugout, and let's say he's between innings, this would be even more wrong than doing it when he arrives at the field thinking it's helping him. So please tell me this guy wasn't doing it between innings.
It was right between his bullpen and his outing.
Oh my gosh. So, anyway, so let's talk about one more chemical thing, because when you're listening to someone talk who has a background like I do, in other words, I am never just looking at the outside in, I'm looking at the inside out. So, the type of fibers that are used in pitching, which is a single action power movement, the type of fiber is not a fiber that recovers because you eat a bowl of oatmeal and you get your carbs in and then you get your energy back. Okay. That's for a whole different type of fiber. That's for a whole different type of pathway. It's for a different systemic need that your muscles have. But when you are a power athlete who does one thing at a time, this is true for pitching, for hitting as well, you recover the fibers that you used in between their use. So when you see an Olympic lifter doing a clean and he's doing ones, so he's getting ready for competition. So he's got his 3 days before he's doing single reps and he's lifting his max. He does one rep and you will see him recover anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. Science has it down. I don't know what the time is, and probably these athletes themselves have people drawing blood and everything else. But it takes a minute for the molecules that recover those fibers to put themselves back together. And fortunately, we have enough of them in pitching to where as you're doing one motion, you use so many and then you use some other ones. This is why we like to build those fibers. And when you're training, you're building either that fiber or another type. You don't want to be disrupting your moments where you have rest in between performance with movements that are challenging or working it out. So, another reason to do your work so that you're not panicking. When I see a pitcher doing crazy things on game day, I know he's not prepared because he's trying to get it in. This is like sitting in the hallway before an exam, sitting on the floor against the wall with your textbook open, wishing you had studied the night before. It doesn't work, right? Jacob,
Exactly.
you're in that mode of life right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I try to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, because it doesn't ever work. In fact, the fact you're doing it when a teacher walks in and sees you cramming, they know you didn't do your homework. So, and also I want to mention to everyone, be really careful with some of the new methods that people are coming out with, where they see you holding angles and measuring the force of a muscle at a certain angle, and it's telling you whether or not you're ready to pitch. You should be pitching, following recovery guidelines, which are based on blood draws that they did to know when enzymes return to normal. That's when you really know when a muscle's recovered. So, fortunately, recovery guidelines, the USA original baseball guidelines, cover all that for you. You just have to count days. You should know when you're recovered. If you're not recovered because you did something unusual in between or you have an injury or whatever, it's an indication to you need another day. But be careful of thinking you can measure the value of a muscle's ability to make concentric contractions when you're doing isometric evaluations. Isometric evaluations evaluate the muscle at that moment in time at that exact angle. Isometric strength is specific to the angle. And I'm seeing a lot of people who think that if they hold their arm at a certain place or a shoulder that does a certain thing at a certain moment, and they've got something they're measuring and it says, whoa, you're way below what you were before, that muscle is definitely not ready to work. Be careful about jumping to those conclusions. Be careful about those correlations. And this means also that the measurement you took, that this one looks less than, that was only a measurement in a moment, in a second, at an angle. And by the way, there are no isometric angles in pitching, even though it looks like there are. The whole thing takes less than a second to perform. So there's no angle that's being held at for any duration. So isometrics is not a form of training. It's not a form of measurement. Be really careful about jumping to conclusions from it. If you're a fan of these devices and these programs, make sure you start to look at it with correlation to other things you might do to measure, like how do you feel? How does the ball come out of your hand? How did you feel when you warmed up? Be sure that you don't get lost in what I call overuse and misuse of science and data. Jacob, do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen some of the newest stuff that pitchers are doing?
Yeah, and I think we talked about that. And just, I feel like one thing is pitchers hear this and they do it and they see it, especially on social media and stuff like that. And then they just try to do it without knowing how to actually do it and why they're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And pitchers are absolutely well, I shouldn't say this because hitters can be a little crazy too. Actually, the way hitters are always looking at their film and making adjustments, I wish pitchers did that more. They're more on the extra stuff. You guys aren't the external stuff. You're more about trying to figure yourself out. Pitchers are about looking for something to help them feel themselves rather than learning how to feel it. So I want to make that distinction. So I'll give you that much. But anyway, speaking about you and pictures and pens, you said something interesting. I, of course, wanted to talk about ways to run the pens and make them real quality, but you said something, and it was your wording that was so cool. So I want you to introduce the next topic, which is you said, Angel, I think pictures need to make pens more real. And I knew exactly what you were talking about, but I thought it was such an interesting choice of words coming from the guy on the other side of the ball who catches hundreds of bullpens a week. Tell us what you see going on, what you meant by that, and what message you have to pitchers about what you see some of the biggest mistakes are in the pens, and also what you see that you like when you see someone do it.
Well, one of the things I see is just pitchers kind of going through the motions on the mound and not really trying to work on either their mechanics or their execution of their pitches. And going off the execution part, I see a lot of pitchers like they'll say, "Oh, I'm going to throw an outside fastball here," and then they throw a perfect inside fastball, and they try to tell themselves like, "Oh, well, that would be a good pitch in a game." But no, it's if you're trying to execute one pitch and you throw it wrong, it's still wrong. And I think that's one of the biggest things I see, and that's one thing that we work on a lot in our pens, Angel, with pitchers. You don't get credit if you don't do what you're planning on doing, and I think that's one thing pitchers really need to work on.
That is such a good point. So, what you're saying is if your brain is telling your hand to execute a pitch to a certain place, regardless if there's a hitter standing there or not, you're basing it on did you execute or not?
Exactly.
Exactly. And you need to be held responsible to yourself for it's lucky that it was within 17 inches, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I think pitchers need to be more precise about that. But I think there's another step with that. So let me ask you if you see this. So, what we do in a session is see, I make pitches tangible. I do not believe that a pitcher misses for no reason. He misses because there's something he did. And, we mentioned Jake last week. Jake can tell you in a second what he did with his fingers because he's aware of them. Remember, Jake is the pitcher that has, a limited hands. He's got three decent fingers, two that don't work at all, and he's throwing strikes. But when he doesn't, we had to teach him to look at what happened there. And he had to do it each time so he could learn because he's feeding into his neural system, which is like a computer. It's like an AI, isn't it? You just feed it in. So I believe that the importance is, and you are 100% right to say to that pitcher, no, 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 throw it again, make it go where you want it. But to do that, you have to, I think, self-assess in the moment and go, why didn't it do this? So last week we talked about fingers, and I forgot to mention last week. I get off and I go, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot to mention when we were talking about finger control that when you're talking about west and east movement, that the index finger pressure moves the ball in towards the pitching arm, and the middle finger moves the ball away. I mean, they have other roles. We were talking about that, but I forgot that significant thing. So that if your ball is too far to the right or left, you want to look at those fingers. Do you think, because what is necessary for pitchers in their bullpen is to make a decision about what they want to work on, have the intent to throw it correctly, and to actually hope that you make mistakes so you can see what you did that caused that, always looking at your fingers, and if you're inconsistent with it, looking to see if you change your body, which is the nice news of having a coach there watching you. Because if you step too far to the right or left than you did on the pitch before, you're going to change your ball release point. Let's say your follow through wasn't solid, your release point's not going to be the same. Do you see pitchers, in addition to them not executing and letting themselves get away with it, do you ever see pitchers saying, I want to know why I didn't throw that correctly?
It is more rare than the other. I think pitchers most of the time won't really ask why or wonder why. They just try to keep doing the same thing and moving the pitch around instead of looking deeper into why they threw it wrong. Or another thing I see is they'll just move on and kind of say, "Oh, it'll fix itself," or "I'll work on it a different time." Instead of like, why not? If you're in a pen for a reason, just fix it now while you're on it right now.
Yes. So, to all the pitching coaches out there and to the pitchers that are listening, the pitching motion is extremely concrete. It is not abstract. Every pitcher should know. My pitchers know this. I know they can learn it, and it's not like they're sitting with a textbook. You have to know what you're doing when you're doing it, what part of the body is moving, and where you land, et cetera, et cetera. That's number one. So you make your motion concrete, not abstract, and also, or I should say, tangible and not abstract. And it's the same thing for the pitches. This is what's so strange to me, Jacob. This is the day and age of data, TrackMan, Rapsodo. Everybody is wanting all these numbers about what you're doing, but they're measuring it in the end product, which is what you did. Well, how can you be so concerned about what you did if you don't know how you did what you did? So why should you congratulate yourself or even get down on yourself? There is an absence of tangibility in the pitching motion and in the pitching world, and it's becoming even more obvious and drastic as more data comes out, as more information is available. Analysis that is statistical analysis and not qualitative about the way the pitcher is moving. And I think that pitchers don't know this enough. If you are missing high, your ball is rolling up out of your hand too soon to do that. Because if the fingers are wrapped around it and you pulled backward on it to get backspin, it can't go high. because your tips are around it pulling. That's physics. So you didn't have the tips in the right place. So it rolls up out of the tips instead of the tips pulling. It's as simple as that. Or your ring finger wasn't placed enough against it, or you didn't have enough grasp on your thumb position to where the ball just let go out of your hand. But there is a reason for it. And if everyone would open their mind to not accepting a ball as a ball in a pen session, which is where you're supposed to make mistakes, then I think the pitchers would start to feel more in control. And as a major league pitcher, I saw pitchers going wrong in these World Series, in these playoff games, I should say. I could see something was happening before it happened. And the thing I notice is their finish starts to become sloppy. And when your finish is different, your foot moved differently, or you spun off of it, or you fell off of it, at the moment you're falling, your hand moves just that much. And it's just that much that causes a ball that should be a strike be a ball. And so when the body stops to work consistently, the hand goes. And I say to myself, how many pitches did that pitcher throw in the first inning or in his bullpen? Did he warm up this pitch? Did he have control over it? Which is, I think, a real issue. Do you understand what I'm saying, Jacob? Does that make sense?
Totally, definitely.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I don't like, and I just heard this yesterday, is pitching coaches thinking that they should be teaching you to warm up fast in your bullpen. Now, if you're a closer that gets thrown in, you're someone who's used to warming up every day. You're only going to throw 15 pitches. That's a whole different story. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk. And that guy didn't become a closer by from age 8 throwing 10 pitches in a bullpen. Your bullpens should be deep enough to where they can accommodate. First of all, they should go enough pitches to where your recovery is over on the next day you're supposed to pitch, whether it's a pen or a game. If you're in off season, the beauty is, for example, if I have a pitcher who I want him to go 79 pitches, he's not pitching for 4 days. On the fifth day, he does his next pen because he needed to go 79. He needed to do specific things on those 4 days to help recover. He needed those number because he's going to throw at least that on game day when he's in season. Plus, he needed to do the work to go deep enough to see, does my slider still break on my fourth set of 15 pitches? So we do a bullpen of 25 pitches, which is 12 fastballs, work in the off speed to 25. We take a break, and then we take a break between 12 and 15 pitches. You know this, Jacob, because this is how we run our bullpens. And they are going deep enough. And when they come in the dugout, what's our conversation? Jacob, tell him about his slider. Well, you know what? You were good here, but remember that one? Well, it did this. So they're having pitcher catcher stuff. I'm listening, and then I convert it into, yeah, and I noticed this. So what he's telling you is you did a little bit of an adjustment with something, and I converted into muscular. So now he's got baseball stuff. He's got movement stuff. He's getting finger stuff, wrist stuff, and sometimes it's body stuff. He goes back out. He's working on that same pitch. That's how a bullpen should be. Look forward to pitching errors and flaws and mistakes in a bullpen, just like your second grade teacher supposedly was supposed to teach you, is there are no mistakes. This is what you should be taught. When you don't do something right, it means it's an opportunity to learn the right way. And we learn by contrast. The guy whose slider doesn't work, when he learns how to make it work, he knows the difference in what to do for it not to work. And he has more of a solid control over that slider than the guy who just it comes to him naturally. He never knows if he's in control of it. But the guy who knows how to make it break, how to do it, what his body needs to be doing, he's the one that's in the driver's seat. What do you think about all of this stuff with working on the same pitch and going deep enough in pens. Do you see guys going deep enough in pens and using bullpens as practice?
I would see a lot of guys using their bullpens as practice, but I think a big problem I see is not going deep enough to where it's realistic to throw as many pitches as you are in a game.
Exactly. So I heard from a pitcher yesterday who had a bullpen who has a one day, Wednesday, Sunday pitching schedule, and his coach doesn't let him go more than 15 pitches or 12 to 15 pitches or 20 pitches, I think. 20 is the max on a Wednesday. And then he goes and he does his warm up pen and a 1 or 2 innings. So, when you're doing a warm up pen plus the pitches, you still count those in off season or when you're getting conditioned, and he had those 3 days off in between, which is too much recovery. So anybody who lifts weights knows that if you have to hit your muscle, especially right when it's recovered. And they show in science the growth that you get from training breaks down within a certain number of days. That's why you hit that body part again, and that's how you increase and keep layering growth and progress to the muscle. If you work the muscle, let it recover too much, then work it again, let it recover too much, you get absolutely nothing. In fact, you get deconditioned. So, for this to be the rule of thumb and not even take into account where the pitcher's at, or to take into account that 3 days in between and not going deep enough to be able to work on things, but also not to condition the pitcher, is really, really bad, especially when you have those number of days to where you can have some freedom with that. And especially in fall when you can control when a pitcher is pitching. So I think that the basic message I want to give to pitching coaches is start using this pen more wisely. I see coaches take 10 pitchers down, throw 15, the guy gets off, he says one correction. I don't know how you construct it to where it can be more meaningful, but even no matter what number they're throwing, they need to be able to evaluate and to see where their weaknesses are and then to work on it. And if you're not letting your pitchers do that, I guarantee that whatever you saw in the pen, you're going to see a magnified version of that on the mound. Jacob, have you noticed that pitchers who aren't getting it done in a pen are also not getting it done on the mound in a game?
Definitely. Because if you can't handle the pen and you can't handle the pressure in the pen and just execution in a pen, then I'm not sure how you expect to get it done when you're actually in a game with pressure and all the outside forces.
Yeah. So when you see a pitcher, he didn't handle his changeup. He could never figure it out. Did you see him figure it out in a game?
Most of the time, no.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes, yes, because it'll be luck and all of a sudden he'll remember. But that's again thinking that pitching's intangible. It is tangible. If you want to have a winning season and you're having seasons that are in and out, plus you have pitchers that are really good and they can do better, but they can't throw enough strikes. Their job is to get outs. And if they're not getting enough outs, and if the hitters are hitting off of them too much, this is work that can be done, and look at it as a gift. And right now, I want to keep repeating this. This time of the year is a gift. And even those who are playing fall ball, it'll end in a few weeks. You've got months to work on this stuff. So do some thinking, coaches and pitchers. Take responsibility for your own performance and figure out, what am I going to work on? Other than probably a slider or a cutter, or, yeah, probably a slider or a cutter, you can pretty much work on a pitch. I mean, curveballs and fastballs have the same forces around the elbow. Changeups have the least. If you're having trouble with the changeup, don't be afraid to throw 20 in a row if it takes you that long to figure it out. If you are interrupting fastballs with changeups, know that, okay, I'm taking a break from the fastball, but I'm getting right back to it after I relieved my elbow or taken a break. Don't be afraid to revisit pitches. So, any other thing about what you see in the pen? I want to switch to some pitching style stuff next, but any other thing in a pen that you've seen that is making you crazy or warming up? Those two topics. Have we covered most of the stuff?
Yeah, I think we're all good on that. I think we did a great job covering mostly everything. And yeah.
Okay, good. So, listen, one of the things I feel really strongly about talking about, since we're all watching the same baseball games right now, is the different pitching styles. Or I want to just mention the difference in pitching styles so that if you've got a kid at home and you're hearing announcers, the announcers are so great, except when it comes to some stuff. They never say anything that's wrong, but they might not give the full picture from a viewpoint of safety or a viewpoint of some other thing. And that's not their job. My job is to educate you. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're someone who wants to learn. People don't listen to me if they don't want to learn. People who don't believe that they should work at this, they're not going to listen to me either. But if you're listening to me, you care about getting it right. And you also care about having a deeper level of information so that when you, as a coach or a pitcher, make a decision, you're making one that is more informed than what you hear just from the baseball world, which its job is to win games and get your people to perform. So they're doing their thing. So, for example, and Jacob, this was one of the first conversations I had with you, and this is the only pitcher's name I'm going to mention today because all these pitchers are amazing. But Sean Manaea, who you're going to see tonight in a playoff, if you listen to this today, and if you haven't, you're already going to know. He is, I don't know if he's changed his style or whatever, but he definitely he's a lefty, correct?
Yes.
And he crosses over his body. In other words, we talk all the time about if you step across your body with your lead foot. So if you're a righty, it's the left leg goes way to the right. Right, he's a lefty. His right leg goes way to the left. You can't get your hips through. If you can't get your hips through, the hips are the steering wheel. If you can't get your hips through, your steering wheel is stuck in one place. And then your upper body has to do the turning towards the delivery on its own, which usually forces a different type of arm action. If the pitcher is not going with that, in other words, he's trying to still be an overarm pitcher, meaning he's still trying to deliver at around 1 or 1:30 on a clock, or it would be 10:30 or 11 for a lefty. He is going to lead with the elbow because he can't get his chest and everything around. If he is crossing over and decides I am going to lower my release point, or if he says I want to lower my release point and so he crosses over to help him, then that makes sense because the guy who delivers at a 2:30 or a 3 or a 9:30 or a 10, he is the guy he is delivering what's called sidearm in science. The elbow extends the hand out before the shoulder rotates towards the plate, and therefore he gets that sidearm action. And the pitcher's body leans into that. So Sean Manaea, I don't know if they were mentioning that he had corrected his problem that he had by lowering his release point. And so I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg, but they showed him doing a drill where instead of throwing to instead of the catcher being on the plate directly in line with the mound he was pitching off of, he had the catcher over on the mound to the right, looking at the plate, to the right of the plate. So when he would deliver from the sidearm left position, the ball would cross in front of him and end up over in that way far lane to the right. Did I describe that accurately, Jacob? Clear
Yeah,
enough?
he was on the left mound throwing to the plate on the right.
Exactly. Now, this brings me to a point that I've mentioned before, and I want everyone to hear this. This is a circular motion, Josh Hader type pitch. These guys do not throw like a what we call in science an overarm thrower, and that's defined by internal rotation of the shoulder, followed by or simultaneous to elbow extension. But the internal rotation is the speedy part of the shoulder. It's bringing the hand forward. Sidearm, it's out to the side. The elbow extends first and he leans into it like a bowler. If you notice when someone bowls, they're leaning down. I can only describe this as a righty. They're leaning down to the right side and their right leg comes off in the back because they're trying to have their weight and lean into that bowling motion. And that is exactly what a sidearm pitcher is doing. And by crossing over, he actually puts the brake on his hips. Then he gets to throw, and then his leg unlocks him around. But that is a circular motion. Now, I heard an announcer say on MLB Central one day, in fact, it was Mark DeRosa, and I loved when he said this. They were describing one of our best pitchers who happens to be a sidearm thrower, and he said, because he's a coach of youth pitchers, and he also, I think, has a 13-year-old son. And he said, "Yeah, this guy's good." But he looked at the guy speaking, and he says, "But you don't teach that, do you? You want to be careful about teaching something like this. And if a child is doing this, you probably want to be careful about letting him do this. If an older pitcher decides he's doing this and he's pulling all the pieces together, okay, I don't know what to comment on that. I'm a safety person, and also there are limitations to those pitchers. Although we see in the series they're bringing out these arms that are submarine sidearm, and I know that's a whole different thing. But I think the point of this is it is a different style of pitching. Know that if you drop somebody's release point, which pitching coaches like to do, there are other adjustments the pitcher has to make. And if he tries to be an upright, more horizontal pitcher while throwing sidearm, he's going to jack up the front of his pitching shoulder. So understand that when you try to change from one style to the other, there are other adjustments, which if you as expert pitching coaches look at the two styles, you will see a difference in where the front foot lands. You will see a difference in the way the trunk leans in or leans away. And that is what you want to have in your head so that if you decide you want to drop a release point, or if you're looking at a pitcher and you go, wow, he's amazing, or wow, Sean Manaea just threw, let's say he throws 7 shutout innings this evening. Do you want your son to pitch like that? Know that there's more involved. Know that it's a different use of some joints and do your research. Even be more thorough than you would ever need to be to make a decision. But just know that they are different styles. Sidearm, where the release point is, requires the body to move into that release point completely differently. And the crossing over is still for an overarm pitcher. In fact, I saw a pitcher warming up in his pen before the game, one of the playoff games, and I noticed right away this is a pitcher whose left foot, he's a righty, was crossing over incorrectly. And I didn't remember ever seeing him do that. And he went out and it was a nightmare. And this is because, in the state of mind he was in, with all his adrenaline going, what he did in his pen is what he repeated because that's what his body was doing. He didn't catch it. He cemented that pattern and he had a really bad evening. And I believe cost that team the game. So these kinds of things are real important. So when you're watching the pitching motion, always know that when you see things that are a little bit different, they are different. It doesn't make them good or bad. It just means that when you see the ball coming out of the hand from the side and not on top, when you hear the announcer say, wow, the way he brings that ball out to the side, he's got great deception. Know that that isn't just the arm dropping down. That is the entire body making a shift, and it should make that shift if that's the way he's going to throw. What do you think about that?
I mean, I haven't seen much of like the Sean Mania throwing, but I definitely see a lot of pitchers with the crossover step. And some pitchers don't even know they're doing it. Some pitchers do it on purpose. But I think it's something that needs to be brought to the light, and everyone should be aware of it, that it's happening.
Yeah, yeah. I am so glad. And when I see those pictures, I'm like, it's hard for me to watch because I'm so involved in the other skill, which to me is an art form. And you always wonder, did he pitch that way when he was a kid, or did he turn into that? It's kind of an
Hmm.
interesting thought. So anyway, I want to just close with just highlighting a few very important singular thoughts that I want to bring up for everyone to remember about things related to the pitching motion and things you want to work on in the off season. So let's talk about when you are working on your changeup and your curveball. These are, and a lot of this comes from, reminded me because of things I saw in the World Series, in the playoff games, and problems that I know pitchers can have. The changeup and the curveball require you to be more out front over your leg than you usually are. So if you're already out front, awesome. And it may feel like you're even more out front on those. But if you're not a pitcher who gets out front and you have trouble with a changeup or a curveball, in fact, you kind of want to find other pitches to take their place. Make sure you know before you give it up that if you can figure out how to be more out front, which requires the correct foot placement, by the way, that you can consult my podcast through the season. We've talked about this. You have to be out front on those two pitches because of what is required from the hand and the way it's delivered. And the arm needs an arm path that is long enough to do that. Actually, all your pitches benefit from a long arm path, but particularly a curveball and a changeup. And this is one of the biggest errors I see when guys come to me and they can't locate these pitches. We work on their front leg mechanics, and then they start to locate these pitches. Jacob, anything on the changeup and the curveball?
I think those two pitches are just something that you really need to cement in your pens, and everything that you just said. And I think those are things you just need to keep working on and not give up on, because I feel like it's an easy thing for people to just look past and, like you said, try to get lucky with them.
Exactly, exactly. The next thing I want to say is when you are creating an exotic pitch, meaning you've got a slider where the thumb placement is a different place than maybe where it is opposite of where it would be on a cutter. You've got different things happening with thumb position, meaning you've got different things happening from the wrist. One of the things that is so important for pitchers to understand is that when you are creating pitches because of your exotic grips and the beautiful way you throw it, make sure you create these pitches from the wrist and the fingers, not the forearm. And if you are trying to get a twisting motion and you try to have it happen up too high, the forearm controls the wrist, but it is more of a stabilizer that allows the wrist to make its intricate movements. The forearm goes supination, pronation. The wrist does that as well, but it has more fine tuned movements. In fact, you can keep your hand pronated and move your wrist and hardly move your forearm. And to keep yourself safe, a lot of the injuries that occur in the forearm and around the elbow are because of pitchers not understanding that the wrist and hand work independently. So what you want to do is hold your forearm down, like have your palm be down and just hold your forearm in place and look at how much motion you can get on your hand. Just twist it around and understand that the forearm is stabilizing. So when you do the intricate movements with the wrist, that the wrist, which can do those crazy movements, is doing it, not that you're using your whole forearm to do it. And that's another reason for misses with a lot of these exotic pitches. And between all the cutters, the sweepers, the slutters, the what else have we got? Jacob, are there more names for pitches this year? We
Splinker.
Splinker, Splinkers, which I'm never saying that word again. Of all the words I don't that is, I said, I'm not saying that word. Okay. But when you've got these exotic pitches that you're designing for yourself, and I love that pitchers are doing this, make sure you're doing this with your wrists and your hands to keep your forearm and elbow safe. And the last thing I want to talk about is I want you to start in this off season with your training, in addition to training your forearm like crazy. And we've done great podcasts this season on it with many exercises for you to refer to if you want really excellent training for your forearm. But one of the things I think is so important for pitchers is to learn how to use the ground. And I talk about the stride all the time because it is the base. If you're driving down the street and you've got four great tires, but your car is a mess, well, you may not go anywhere if everything's falling apart. You've got to be able to stay on the ground. You've got to be able to use the ground. Your back foot needs to know how to be placed solidly into the ground so your hips can move sideways and so your front foot can land directly across from your hips. And your front foot has to be stable so it can carry the entire weight of the body on top of it, not in front of it, so your arm can be in front of it. And unless you work to feel the ground underneath you, and I know a lot of strength coaches like to use jumps and different things like that. I don't like the risk for that with my pitchers, so I find other ways to do it. But learning how to feel the ground underneath you and just knowing that it's there and knowing that your best friends are your feet and all the energy is transferred upward to your hand from the feet is an important thing to know. And so I want pitchers to start thinking about things that are very ground based for them in terms of learning how to use their lower body better. And if you do this, you'll come out on top.
I think that was a great finish to the list. I loved it.
Yeah. So off season, get serious about making some changes. Don't be the pitcher tomorrow that you were yesterday. And
Hmm.
coaches, please, if you have any questions at all about anything that I've said today or during the season, please write me, call me. I'm available to consult with coaches at any time to give you advice. And the coaches that call me, I absolutely love it because if I can reach one coach with one piece of information, I know I'm going to have hundreds and hundreds of arms that are going to be that much better. And to all my listeners, thank you for making this another great season. And Jacob, thank you so much. This has been great. And by the way, everyone, Jacob got signed for another season. He got signed this morning.
I'm excited. I'm excited for next season, season 12.
So anyway, thank you for listening. Be sure and contact me at angel@gymscience.com or go to my website, Angel Borrelli Pitching. You can email me from there. And I will see you next season.